They escorted me up to the penthouse executive suite as if I were reporting for a formal military disciplinary board hearing. Security guards stood silently by the polished elevator doors, and two junior administrative aides flanked me down the long, carpeted corridor. Kendra Vance did not stand when I entered her sprawling corner office on the top floor of our corporate tower. She sat comfortably behind her polished glass desk, gesturing toward the leather chair across from her with the kind of casual, dismissive wave you give a server who brought the wrong side dish. Kendra was 33 years old, held an advanced business administration degree from Stanford, and had been brought in by our board of directors 14 months prior to spearhead what she called an aggressive digital transformation. She radiated venture capital arrogance, constantly dropping modern buzzwords into every conversation, talking endlessly about organizational alignment, agile workforces, leveraging cross-functional synergies, and optimizing operational overhead to maximize investor margins. She viewed the defense sector not as a vital public trust, but as a playground for financial re-engineering and aggressive cost-cutting. I am Garrison Miller, 55 years old, and I had given Aegis Defense Technologies 28 continuous years of my life. I started at the company back in 1996, immediately following my honorable discharge from Army Signals Intelligence. During my military service, I had been deployed to West Germany with the 1st Armored Division, spending 4 years managing tactical encryption arrays, satellite downlink nodes, and classified field communications networks. I served under experienced non-commissioned officers who taught me that attention to detail in communications security was the difference between mission success and battlefield tragedy. I knew what it meant to operate under immense pressure when active forces depended on secure signal transmission. When I transitioned to civilian life in 1996, Aegis Defense Technologies was merely a scrappy defense startup consisting of just 15 engineers operating out of a converted brick warehouse in Aurora, Colorado. We worked 80-hour weeks in sub-zero winter temperatures, surviving on lukewarm coffee and frozen meals, while chasing government communications contracts that established defense contractors considered far too risky or complex to pursue. We built our first cryptographic prototypes by hand, soldering circuit boards on makeshift workbench tables, testing field units late into the night until the sun rose over the eastern plains. We risked our early savings and sacrificed personal comforts because we believed in the vital defense mission. Fresh out of active military service, equipped with top-secret security clearances, specialized cryptologic training, and a deep understanding of tactical network vulnerabilities that defense agencies desperately needed. Over nearly 3 decades, I helped transform that modest Aurora startup into a powerhouse defense enterprise managing high-stakes government systems across multiple military branches. I sacrificed weekends, family gatherings, and personal vacations to ensure our defense networks remained impenetrable against evolving cyber threats from hostile foreign entities. Kendra flipped open a sleek tablet displaying my personnel profile, financial metrics, and corporate tenure history. Her voice carried that hollow corporate detachment characteristic of executives who view employees merely as line-item expenses on a balance sheet. She acknowledged that my historical performance evaluations had been consistently solid, but stated, matter-of-factly, that the company was pivoting toward a digital-native workforce. She claimed the modern cybersecurity landscape required fresh thinking and adaptable mindsets, subtly implying that someone of my generation no longer possessed the technical agility needed to lead modern defense initiatives. Fresh thinking, the sheer absurdity of her statement made a quiet fury stir inside me. The proprietary cybersecurity architecture generating 65% of Aegis Defense Technologies' total operating revenue was my personal creation. I had designed that foundational security system during an intense emergency crisis back in 2011, when our military communications network came under a sophisticated cyber attack from state-sponsored foreign threat actors. While executive leadership panicked and considered shutting down servers, I locked myself inside the secure server vault for 72 consecutive hours, living on black coffee and sheer military determination until I engineered a revolutionary multi-layered encryption protocol that successfully neutralized the breach and became the gold standard for defense network security. I maintained a calm, neutral facial expression. 21 years of military service and decades in the defense industry teach you never to display emotion when an officer who has never seen actual combat attempts to lecture you on battlefield strategy. Kendra continued speaking in polished corporate doublespeak, explaining that workforce realignment was essential to eliminate high-cost senior personnel who created organizational friction. To her, 2 decades of institutional knowledge and battlefield-proven engineering meant nothing compared to cutting payroll costs to impress quarterly private equity investors. She had brought in young external consultants who knew how to build flashy slide decks but could not read a basic hex dump or understand hardware-level encryption protocols. She slid a thick manila folder across the glass desk. She explained that the company was offering a generous early retirement package that included 18 months of base salary continuation, full medical benefits, and an executive transition recommendation letter. However, the offer was strictly contingent upon me signing the attached liability waivers, non-compete agreements, and intellectual property release documents before the end of the week. Under federal statutory provisions, specifically the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, codified at Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 621, as well as the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, under Section 2101, corporations routinely use bundled severance packages to rush departing senior employees into waiving their legal rights before they can consult independent counsel. I did not touch the folder. Behind Kendra, the clear morning sunlight bathed the Denver skyline, illuminating the snow-capped peaks of the Front Range in the distance. That panoramic penthouse view had been built on the back of cybersecurity systems I had engineered with my own hands. I looked at her calmly and listened as she instructed me to hand over all administrative encryption keys and conclude my transition activities by 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I stood up straight, adjusted the lapels of my suit jacket, and met her dismissive gaze. I suggested that she might want to pause before finalizing any formal departure paperwork. Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked out of the executive suite. I walked past the young executive assistants glued to their dual monitors, past the entry-level programmers who viewed me as a dinosaur who belonged to a bygone era of mainframe computing, and through the gleaming marble lobby decorated with expensive contemporary artwork and empty corporate mission statements. Outside, the sharp October air had that distinct Rocky Mountain chill. I got into my vehicle and drove down Colfax Avenue toward Murphy's Tavern, a quiet, low-lit establishment where defense engineers, veterans, and military intelligence contractors had gathered to talk shop for decades. I took a booth in the quietest section near the back, ordered a bourbon neat, and dialed the phone number of my longtime military comrade and patent attorney, Gabriel Morales. I knew that Gabriel understood both military tactical discipline and complex federal law better than anyone else in Colorado. I was ready to defend what I had built. Gabriel met me at his law office in downtown Denver within 30 minutes of my call. His workspace was utilitarian and dignified, featuring framed military commendations from our joint deployment on one wall and his law degrees and state bar admissions on the other. On his desk sat a framed photograph of our old unit standing in front of an armored communications vehicle in Germany during the late 1990s. Gabriel had graduated at the top of his class from law school after leaving active service, specializing in defense technology, intellectual property, and federal procurement litigation. He greeted me warmly, poured 2 cups of dark roast coffee, and asked me to break down exactly what had occurred during my meeting with Kendra Vance. I recounted how Kendra had forced me into early retirement under the banner of workforce optimization, offering an 18-month severance package designed to silence any legal objections. I explained that before making any decisions regarding the severance documents, I wanted to conduct a thorough legal review of the original patent filings for the cybersecurity architecture I had invented in 2011. That foundational technology was currently licensed to dozens of major defense contractors and government agencies, securing critical command networks worldwide. Gabriel opened his secure terminal and logged into the official database of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. He spent nearly 20 minutes quietly examining the original patent application files, assignment registries, and chain of title records for patent number 8,947,651. As he scrolled through page after page of federal records, his professional demeanor shifted from calm attentiveness to intense focus. He turned his screen toward me and pointed to the foundational filing documents submitted in November of 2011. The original application explicitly listed my private residential address in Littleton, Colorado, as the primary inventor address rather than the corporate headquarters of Aegis Defense Technologies. Furthermore, Gabriel highlighted a specific administrative notation on the USPTO docket, stating that formal assignment of intellectual property rights was pending corporate legal verification. Gabriel executed a comprehensive search of the Federal Assignment Database and confirmed that no executed assignment agreement had ever been recorded by Aegis Defense Technologies under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 261. Gabriel explained the profound legal ramifications of this oversight under United States patent jurisprudence. Under Title 35 of the United States Codes, Section 102 and Section 261, an invention remains the exclusive personal property of the individual inventor unless a formal, written assignment contract is properly executed and recorded with the Patent Office. Back in 2011, during the chaos of responding to federal defense contract deadlines, corporate management had drafted internal memoranda regarding patent assignment but had completely forgotten to have me sign the actual legal transfer contracts. To make matters even more damaging for Aegis, Gabriel pulled up the original corporate charter and bylaws established by founder Elias Thorne in 1996. Clause 14 of the foundational bylaws stated explicitly that any intellectual property created by employees converted into corporate assets only after proper legal assignment documentation was fully executed and formally filed with both the Patent Office and the corporate secretary. Because that contractual requirement was never fulfilled, the corporate bylaws themselves confirmed that Aegis had never acquired legal title to the technology. Consequently, patent number 8,947,651 belonged legally, exclusively, and unencumbered to me, Garris's Miller. Gabriel leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. It was the exact same expression he used to get right before our unit intercepted hostile communications in the field. He pulled up corporate disclosure filings and military procurement records, revealing that Aegis Defense Technologies had executed active sub-licensing agreements with 73 separate entities, including the Department of Defense, NATO Cyber Command, and major defense prime contractors. The proprietary technology was currently embedded in communications infrastructure that generated approximately $450 million in gross annual revenue across the global defense sector. Every single one of those 73 licensing agreements was legally defective and completely invalid. Aegis Defense Technologies had spent 13 years licensing, selling, and monetizing proprietary military technology that they had zero legal right to commercialize. Under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271, their unauthorized distribution of my patented architecture constituted massive, continuous patent infringement. Additionally, by representing to federal agencies and international allies that they held clean legal title to the technology, Aegis management had committed a severe breach of fiduciary duty and rendered their commercial contracts void ab initio under federal contract principles. They had committed severe corporate misrepresentations to institutional investors and federal auditors. I sat quietly as the full tactical scope of the situation took shape. Kendra Vance had dismissed me as an expensive legacy cost, entirely ignorant of the fact that her company's flagship technological asset was legally owned by the man she had just pushed out the door. She had inadvertently handed me absolute legal leverage over her entire $450 million defense enterprise. Gabriel laid out our battle plan with tactical precision. First, we would request certified ownership certificates directly from the director of the patent office. Second, we would serve a formal cease and desist demand upon Kendra Vance and Aegis Executive Management. Third, we would prepare a comprehensive claim for retroactive royalty damages covering 13 years of unauthorized commercial exploitation. We sat in Gabriel's office until late afternoon, mapping out every legal maneuver and contingency. Gabriel noted that when corporate executives operate with supreme arrogance, they almost always overlook foundational legal compliance. They assume that lower-tier engineers and long-tenured employees will quietly accept whatever severance scraps are thrown to them. They never expect a veteran who understands both technical system architecture and federal statutory law to turn their own corporate negligence into a decisive legal counteroffensive. We prepared every document with surgical accuracy to ensure our position was unassailable in federal court. We were fully prepared for total legal war. I spent the remainder of the afternoon at my home in Littleton, retrieving records from my garage workshop. Over 28 years, I had maintained military-grade filing discipline. I opened heavy metal storage lockers containing original engineering notebooks, handwritten technical schematics on graph paper dated October 2011, internal electronic mail printouts, and personal logs detailing every step of the development process for patent number 8,947,651. Every line of code, every cryptographic formula, and every network flow diagram had been preserved in binder after binder. I had retained hard copies of the original patent draft submitted to our external patent attorney back in 2011, complete with my personal handwritten notes in the margins pointing out that the corporate assignment section had been left blanks pending board review. I also located backup drives containing time-stamped digital signatures, verifying that the algorithms were finalized on my personal workstation prior to corporate deployment. I laid out the physical documentation across my workbench. Seeing the yellowed graph paper covered in my own handwriting brought back memories of those intense 72 hours in 2011. I remembered the cold fluorescent lights of the server vault, the hum of cooling fans, and the quiet determination to build an uncrackable system. I had given my youth, my energy, and my health to build technology that protected American servicemen and women across the globe. At 3:15 that afternoon, my phone rang. The caller introduced himself as Elliot Pierce, General Counsel for Aegis Defense Technologies. His voice was laced with smooth corporate professionalism as he stated he was following up on my departure meeting with Kendra Vance to finalize my retirement agreements and execute standard release documents. He dropped references to corporate goodwill and implied that signing quickly would ensure smooth processing of my healthcare transition. I replied calmly that my legal representative, Gabriel Morales, would handle all communications regarding my employment status and intellectual property matters. Elliot tried to pass off the request as routine administrative paperwork necessary for processing my severance payments. I informed him firmly that all future contact must go through Gabriel's office, then terminated the call without engaging in further debate. Within an hour, Elliot sent an electronic mail message containing an expanded 30-page severance contract. This version was far more aggressive than the initial paperwork Kendra had shown me. It contained broad non-compete restrictions, binding non-disparagement covenants, and explicit language requiring me to formally relinquish all past, present, and future intellectual property claims against Aegis Defense Technologies. They were clearly attempting to rush me into signing away my statutory rights before their legal department discovered the massive flaw in their patent chain of title. I forwarded the document to Gabriel with a brief note, and he replied within minutes, instructing me not to sign a single line. That evening, Gabriel and I met to calculate our financial and legal claims under federal patent enforcement guidelines. Standard industry royalty rates for foundational cybersecurity patents in the defense sector typically range between 3 and 5% of gross generated revenue. Based on $450 million in annual revenue generated by systems utilizing my technology over 13 years, conservative retroactive royalty calculations yielded claims between $175 million and $290 million. Furthermore, under Title 35 of the United States Code Section 284, if a defendant engages in willful patent infringement or displays reckless disregard for patent rights, after receiving formal notice, federal courts have full authority to award treble damages, tripling the total financial liability. However, both Gabriel and I understood that this legal struggle carried profound responsibilities beyond personal financial compensation. The cybersecurity protocols I designed were actively securing tactical data feeds for deployed military units, satellite arrays, and allied defense systems. A sudden, unmanaged shutdown of the encryption architecture would create severe national security vulnerabilities for active combat forces in the field. Gabriel contacted Colonel Rebecca Danvers, a high-ranking officer at Army Cyber Command with whom he had served in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. Gabriel provided Colonel Danvers with a confidential briefing regarding the title defect affecting Aegis Defense Technologies. He explained that Aegis had been sub-licensing military encryption systems without legal authorization from the actual patent holder. Colonel Danvers immediately grasped the critical nature of the warning, expressed deep concern over potential operational disruptions, and requested continuous tactical updates as our legal actions progressed. She confirmed that Army Cyber Command would not allow Aegis to sweep technical vulnerabilities under the rug. On Thursday morning, Gabriel received certified registry documentation from the United States Patent and Trademark Office formally confirming that I was the sole, unencumbered owner of patent number 8,947,651. Armed with undisputed federal documentation, Gabriel finalized a comprehensive cease and desist demand under Title 35 of the United States Code Section 271. The formal notice declared that Aegis Defense Technologies was engaged in deliberate, unauthorized commercial exploitation of my patented technology. It demanded an immediate audited accounting of all subs licensing revenue collected since 2011 and gave the corporation 72 hours to enter into good faith negotiations for a valid commercial license, or face total operational revocation and federal court injunctions. At precisely 4:47 on Thursday afternoon, a certified legal process server delivered the formal demand package directly to Kendra Vance in her penthouse office. Gabriel received electronic confirmation of service signed personally by Kendra. The initial tactical missile had been launched, striking at the very core of the corporate hubris that had governed Aegis Defense Technologies. I knew the coming days would unleash a corporate storm across their entire legal and executive apparatus. By Friday morning, an atmosphere of acute panic had enveloped the executive suite at Aegis Defense Technologies. Gabriel received multiple urgent telephone calls and electronic messages from Elliot Pierce, begging for an immediate emergency meeting to discuss what he called a catastrophic legal misunderstanding. Gabriel calmly informed Elliot that we would not meet over the weekend, allowing Aegis's executive leadership and board of directors 72 full hours to contemplate the reality of their exposure. Over the weekend, I maintained my established routine to keep my mind focused and grounded. I took long hikes through the foothills with Ranger, enjoying the quiet trails as the autumn leaves fell across the dirt paths. I spent hours in my garage working on the engine of my 1969 Camaro in my garage, tuning the carburetor and polishing the chrome valve covers. Working with mechanical tools reminded me of fundamental physical reality. A machine either runs correctly or it fails, regardless of marketing rhetoric. Maintaining personal discipline reminded me that my value was defined by my skills, my service, and my character, not by corporate executive titles or quarterly balance sheets. On Sunday evening, I received an unexpected email from Elias Thorne, the retired founder of Aegis Defense Technologies. Elias wrote that he had learned of the patent dispute through senior board contacts and was flying into Denver from his ranch in Montana. He requested a private face-to-face meeting on Monday morning before formal legal proceedings escalated further. I agreed to meet him at Murphy's Tavern, explicitly stating that no binding agreements would be considered without Gabriel present. At 10 o'clock on Monday morning, Elias walked into Murphy's Tavern and joined me in our usual booth. He looked tired and visibly weathered, carrying the heavy burden of watching the company he founded face existential ruin. He acknowledged candidly that pushing me into early retirement was an unmitigated executive disaster, admitting that turning operational control over to private equity managers and corporate careerists had severed the firm from its foundational values. He admitted that bringing in Kendra Vance was the single worst strategic decision of his career. Elias attempted to appeal to our shared history, arguing that revoking the patent license would destroy the livelihoods of hundreds of hard-working employees and inflict serious collateral damage on military operations. I listened respectfully before responding that Kendra Vance had treated 28 years of dedicated service as disposable overhead. I made it clear that while I respected what we had built in the early days, I would not allow sentimental appeals to shield corporate executives from accountability. On Wednesday morning, both legal teams assembled for a formal mediation session at a high-end legal conference facility in downtown Denver. A heavy mountain snowstorm blanketed the city as we gathered in the main conference room on the 16th floor. Kendra Vance entered the room, accompanied by Elliot Pierce and a team of senior intellectual property litigation partners from one of the most expensive law firms in the country. Kendra appeared visibly shaken, her usual boardroom posture replaced by pale anxiety as she took her seat across from us. Her confident executive persona had completely dissolved into sheer nervousness. Elliot opened the negotiations by presenting an initial settlement offer of $75 million, combined with a formal corporate plaque recognizing my historical contributions and an executive consulting retainer in exchange for a complete assignment of patent rights and a perpetual commercial license. Gabriel and I stepped out of the conference room to caucus in a private breakout suite. We agreed that the offer was an insulting attempt to settle a multi-hundred-million-dollar liability for pennies on the dollar. Returning to the room, Gabriel delivered our non-negotiable counter-demand: full retroactive licensing royalties of $150 million covering past unauthorized commercial use, a permanent 10% ongoing royalty on all future product deployments, an advisory board seat with direct veto power over veteran hiring and retention practices, a formal public statement acknowledging that my technology was the foundation of their success, and the immediate resignation of Kendra Vance for gross breach of fiduciary duty. The conference room fell into absolute silence. Elliot gasped, claiming our terms were outrageous and legally unacceptable. Kendra stared in disbelief as her lawyers frantically whispered amongst themselves. Seeing their continued hesitation, Gabriel stood up, gathered his files, and formally announced that effective in 72 hours, Aegis Defense Technologies' authorization to utilize patent number 8,947,651 was officially revoked under federal law. We walked out into the falling Denver snow with complete confidence in our position. The news of the patent license revocation broke across national financial news networks and defense industry publications by Thursday morning. The Wall Street Journal published a lead investigation titled "Corporate Defense Contractor Faces Crisis as Patent Owner Revokes Operating License." Major financial networks covered the story during morning trading broadcasts. When the stock market opened, shares of Aegis Defense Technologies plummeted by 15% within the first hour of trading as institutional investors panicked over the firm's legal exposure. Hedge funds began aggressively shorting Aegis equity. Financial analysts openly predicted that Aegis was facing catastrophic operational disruption and potential government contract cancellations. By midday, 47 urgent calls had flooded Kendra Vance's executive suite from frantic procurement officials at the Pentagon, NATO defense logistics officers, and prime contractors demanding immediate verification that their communications security would not be terminated. The Department of Defense issued a formal inquiry demanding an immediate explanation regarding the legal status of the encryption infrastructure. At 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, E.S. Thorne called my phone directly from the Aegis boardroom. He stated that the board of directors had convened an emergency executive meeting to avert total corporate collapse. He asked what was required to halt public court filings and restore commercial operations. I reiterated our precise conditions: $150 million in retroactive royalties, 10% ongoing royalties, an advisory board position, structural veteran employment protections, and Kendra's immediate removal. I reminded Elias that once the 72-hour revocation window closed, any continued commercial deployment of the encryption protocols by Aegis would constitute willful patent infringement. Under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 284, subjecting the company to mandatory treble damages and federal asset seizures. At 4:45 in the afternoon, 15 minutes before our absolute deadline, Elias called back to inform us that the board of directors had unanimously voted to accept every single one of our terms. Kendra Vance had formally tendered her executive resignation, effective immediately, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. Her corporate restructuring campaign had ended in complete tactical defeat. The final settlement contracts were formally executed the following Monday morning. Aegis Defense Technologies transferred $150 million in retroactive licensing royalties into our designated escrow account and executed a legally binding 10% ongoing royalty agreement for all future defense applications. Furthermore, the settlement agreement established a permanent corporate policy across the firm. No senior employee with more than 20 years of service could be terminated without prior board review and formal cause verification, effectively protecting veteran engineers from predatory age discrimination. 6 months after concluding the settlement, I allocated $25 million from the proceeds to establish the Miller Veteran Innovation Fund. The charitable foundation provides comprehensive legal defense resources, patent prosecution assistance, and strategic guidance to military veterans who invent technical intellectual property but lack the financial means to protect their creations against corporate exploitation. Sitting on the back deck of my home in Littleton, watching Ranger play in the yard while sipping dark coffee, I reflected on the long journey from my sudden dismissal to this ultimate victory. Corporate executives often assume that experienced senior professionals are easily replaceable line items, blind to the reality that true institutional knowledge and foundational innovation are the genuine lifeblood of any serious enterprise. The ultimate satisfaction did not come from pulling down an arrogant corporate leader, but from standing firm on my principles, asserting legal justice, and creating a lasting shield that ensures the veterans and innovators who follow in my footsteps will never be treated as disposable again.